let's just scroll over to where we have a lot of range. Let's say convection mode. And a default temperature in convection is 355, but if I want to change temperature, I immediately go to my knob, and now I can either adjust it upwards or downwards, right? And one of the nice advantages of this model versus the newer model is you have a broader range of temperatures in almost every single mode that come with the oven. In the case of convection, you can go as low as 85 degrees. So ideal for, again, for just a slow dehydration of something, or maybe you want to use convection to defrost something or just warm something up. You can go as low as 85 degrees. Also could be used for proofing, or you can go as high as 445 degrees. And this is going to be the same setting in both convection humid and convection steam as it is in convection, right? So now, again, if we're looking at just steam mode, when we want to change that temperature, again, the maximum is 210, and the lowest setting, again, is 85. So ideal for defrosting and anything like that, proofing, steam. A low temperature with proofing would be ideal between 85 and say 100 to maybe 105 degrees at the maximum setting. So that's your manual transmission. Again, just remember, you're switching the mode with the button to scroll through the modes. Once you've entered that mode, you're again going to use the knob to control your temperature settings up and down. All right, so that's manual transmission. So as we're talking about that, let's look at these two buttons just to the right of the knob, because there's a very distinct difference between these two. The first button says timer. The second button says time, right? Now, the significant difference between this is that the timer will have no impact when it's in use on the function of the oven. So you could use it if you were boiling something on the stove and you needed to time it, say, and you wanted to use a timer. You could just use that timer function and then just scroll up. It goes in 10-second increments until you get beyond 10 minutes. In that case, then, once you jump past 10, it's going to start going up in 1-minute increments until you reach an hour, and then it'll go up again up to 9 hours and 59 minutes. But that timer can be used independently of the oven. So if you're just running something else in the kitchen and you want to time with it, but it's not going to have anything to do with the function of the oven, right? So you don't have to worry about that, all right? But if we're coming into a timing mode, and in the new oven, we call that the duration mode. The time mode will then shut the oven off at the exact moment that you tell it to by setting it in that time feature. So let's just make an example of that. So we'll go into the mode, we'll choose steam, right? We'll do 200 degrees, right? Then we're gonna go over here and set time. And now we're gonna set that. It defaults at 15 minutes, but we could go down to as low as just a few seconds if we wanted to. So we could do that. So let's go up to, let's do 20 seconds, right? So then we go, okay. So now the oven's going to run 200 degree steam for 20 seconds. And as it counts down using the time feature, it will then shut itself off immediately at the end of that timer. It won't run beyond that. So when, again, just like with the newer oven, when you know the duration that you'd like to set for whatever cooking process you're doing, use the time button, and that will stop the oven at the end of that timing and that timed cooking. You have any questions yet, Lynn? Hold on, let me make this be quiet. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, great.
Grateful some folks couldn't figure that out. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it took us about 5 minutes to figure that out as well. No, but there we go. So now you kind of understand the difference between the two. The timer is completely independent. The time is when you want to set it to limit the function of the oven in whatever mode that you're using. All right?
Real quick then?
Yes.
So if you're wanting to like hold meat, you know, post cooking it, is that the best way to do it with that timer mode that you were just talking about? Sorry. With just time, you mean? Just using the time mode versus the timer? In other words, when you're doing like a slow roast and you cook something and then you want to let it hold, yeah, probe should remain inserted into the meat, right? And then you can set it to hold that temperature, right? I mean, you don't really need to set it as long as the probe is inserted. The oven will continue to do that, all right? So again, just a quick recap. Your manual transmission is your mode button that gets you into your
standard cooking modes: steam, convection, convection, steam, convection, humid, reheat, and on this oven, we have the auto steam bake feature for baking bread or pastries or something like that, right? And normally we find that in the gourmet feature on the new oven, but on this one, it's in our basic modes. And again, so if you look at the auto steam bake feature right here, right, you can set your temperature a maximum of 445 degrees. You can bake in double racks in there as well, although baking loaves of bread on 2 racks, they're going to be pretty small loaves. So you can set whatever temperature you like once you have it at that point. Then if you set your timer for your auto steam bake feature, you might set it for whatever it takes to bake your bread, and just say 42 minutes, right? And then we just hit OK. And now that feature is started. Again, the oven is going to do a steam phase at the beginning and then swap it over to do a convection phase in order to brown the bread. With the auto steam bake, you're getting the best of both, but the steam is going to be in the beginning and not throughout the entire process of baking the bread. The oven will do that. What you all do have control over here, though, is temperature and time. So you get that, but the oven will take over the steam for you in that auto steam bake phase. All right. So that's sort of the basic modes when you're going to be driving the oven and telling it exactly what you want to do. In this oven, the gourmet features are accessed through the knob in the middle of the oven, right? So when the oven is completely off and you want to access your gourmet feature, you're going to touch that oven in the middle, just press it in once, and it's going to automatically default to what we call the Wolf Gourmet feature. And then you can scroll through the different features in the oven that are kind of in there deeply, right? So Wolf Gourmet is one. The next one is going to be your slow roast mode. You've also got recipe mode. So those are recipes that are in the oven that are pre-programmed in there. My recipes are just like the favorites button, and we'll show you how to program one of these so that if you want to put your own processes in for your own recipes, we can show you how to do that. And then the other choices, there's your keep warm feature. So when you want to just run the oven to keep something warm, to hold something, again, if you want to access that, you just touch the OK button, and immediately it's going to give you a default of 175 degrees with convection humid. So we've got a little bit of, it's trapping all the moisture in the oven. Remember, we talked about how in this oven, we're not venting that moisture out. We're just holding it in there. So for keeping something warm, this is ideal. 175, and its default is 30 minutes, right? So if you wanted to change the time on that, you can then scroll up, and I believe it'll go to 90 minutes will be your maximum. Let me just confirm that for yes. So a maximum of 1 hour and 30 minutes of holding something in your oven, and it defaults, like I said, at 30 minutes. So you can scroll up with that, and then once you've achieved if you want to say hold that dish at 175 for 45 minutes, once that's programmed in, just hit the OK button and then press it one more time, and that starts the process. Okay, so that's how that works, right? And then if obviously you want to cancel it, you just hit the off button, and that will do that, will help turn it off, right? So if you want to hit end, just scroll to where it says end, again, touch OK, and now it's turning itself off, right? It's also giving us a residual heat. You'll notice that as the oven is cooling down, you'll always see that in the corner, the residual heat in the oven right now, it's about 207 degrees from when we ran that little program before, so you can see how quickly it heats up. So again, back to the gourmet features. Again, it defaults to Wolf Gourmet. If you turn back one click, you get the back button, and all that does is just take you back to the beginning, right? So again, here we go, Wolf Gourmet, slow roast, recipes, your recipes, keeping warm. Here's the user settings. So that's giving you access to changing sounds, the brightness of the panel, and all of those choices are in the user settings button there as well. Descaling. So when the oven tells you to descale, this is where you'll come to descale it. And again, it'll be that same process of pouring the Degol descaler into the reservoir and then running that program through. And now you've got your cleanse, and we were talking about this last week, and we talked about the sanitize button on the Wolf Gourmet, and the more button in the new, convection steam oven, or the next generation. Cleanse and sanitize are the same thing. And that's where you get those choices for doing baby bottles or preparing your jam jars for preserves or pickles or whatever it might be. And then you've got your preserve jam feature there as well. So that's where that's what comes in at cleanse. And then the last is just the back. So what this doesn't have on it, which is probably not of any great shame to anyone, is the spa button. You can't put your warm towel, although you could easily do warm towels in this oven. All you would use is the steam mode with your pre-wetted towels in there, and then just warm them up if you want to do that. So you don't need a special button just for that, but you can do that in here like that. So let's just talk about some of the programming in this gourmet feature, the Wolf Gourmet feature, much like the More button is on the other model. So Wolf Gourmet, if you touch that in there, you're going to now get different processes. Again, the oven is making the decision in terms of temperature, in terms of the quantity of steam, and all of those good things. So you just scroll through, you have fresh appetizers, frozen appetizers. Again, the difference is going to be with a fresh appetizer, it's going to ask you, how would you like the exterior of the appetizer to look? Would you like it to be medium? Would you like it to be lightly browned? Or would you like it to be dark brown? All you do is choose that. The oven will then make the selection in terms of time, 26 minutes, and then it will choose temperature and mode to appropriately cook those fresh appetizers to the degree of doneness that you would like. Okay, so again, always scrolling to where you see the back, where it says back with the little arrow in it, and then you can always go backwards a step. So now we're back to those fresh appetizers. Here's the frozen appetizers. So again, what that's going to ask you now again is just like on the other model is packaging directions. How long does the package instruct you to cook them? The first choice is going to be 8 to 12 minutes. Second choice, 13 to 20 minutes. Last choice is 21 to 35 minutes. All you do is select the corresponding amount of time that's on the package, select that on your oven, touch enter. Now insert the appetizers. It's going to tell you it's going to take about 37 minutes to cook, but again, it will decide temperature and time, temperature and steam quantity in order to cook those appetizers to that degree of doneness that you've chosen. All right, so let me go back one more. So again, frozen appetizers. Now what they have in here are very specific recipes, a little different than the other model with the gourmet features that just has steam mode for asparagus, steam mode for broccoli, or something along those lines. If you don't have this, just let us know in the comments, and Lynn and I can send this out, but there's a sheet here. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but essentially this is a guide, a very broad guide of sort of approximate cooking times, temperatures, and cooking modes for some pretty well-known items. So you have things like asparagus, artichokes, green beans, broccoli. Then you have things like chicken breast, fish fillets, things like that. We can send one of these out to you, or we can provide it to you digitally, but this is on both sides. It has some nice helpful tips on there for that. So this would be something we could really, really, it might be helpful to you because you don't have that gourmet feature like in the next model, which just says you want to steam broccoli, it's 8 minutes at this temperature. This will provide that for you. Do you have some questions, Lynn, that have come through, or anybody have any questions up till now that that we need to answer for you right off the bat? Nothing yet? Okay. All right. So again, so these recipes that are in here, a baked dish might be an example of, say, a lasagna or some form of a casserole, right? And you would again choose that just by pressing that OK right there in the middle. That selects it. Again, it's going to always ask you, how do you want it to appear, whether it's medium, lightly, or well browned. And then the oven will then essentially set mode, temperature for you, and then give you an approximate time as how long it will take to be done. Again, using that sensor setting to gauge the mass of the item that you're cooking, so we know that it's going to be cooked through and then cooked to the degree of doneness that you would like, right? So the baked dish, again, there's the souffle button, baked potatoes, frozen potato products, again, just like with the frozen appetizers, you're just putting the packaging instructions in there and choosing that. Braising meat, again, it's going to always ask you the degree of doneness. It's not going to say medium or medium well. It's just going to say how do you want the exterior to look? And then it will gauge from that. There's your fresh pizza, frozen pizza, all of those things. And make steaming a custard, perhaps, if you don't know how to do that. So, and then here's your bread button if you're wanting to bake bread. And this gives you the choices, again, of medium brown, lightly browned, or well browned. So a lot like the more gourmet feature that we have in the second generation oven, this is that feature. Again, the oven will decide temperature and steam quantity in addition to the time it'll take to bake that loaf of bread, right? But it knows you're wanting to bake bread, right? There's a pastry. So all of these are very, very similar to the other oven. There are just slightly fewer choices that you have in here, but it will function exactly the same way it's making decisions. All you're telling it is how you want that exterior to look, right? So that's the Wolf Gourmet feature. Now the slow roast feature, let's make sure that we all understand how this works and how we're programming this properly when we want to use our probe and we want to slow roast a piece of meat to make a centerpiece for a dinner party. Again, you select the slow roast by touching on it, and now you scroll through the various cuts: veal tenderloin, veal rump, or a top round, a slightly lesser cut, if you will, of veal. Veal loin, again, very, very lean, very mild. But let's go all the way to beef tenderloin because that's pretty easy to use. Everybody can kind of understand how this will work. So you get to beef tenderloin. Now you select what you want to do. Now you're choosing between the two temperatures. It's medium or medium rare. So let's just start with rare. When I press enter, what we're showing on the oven now is the probe temperature, because the probe is illuminated here. The probe temperature for the rare beef tenderloin is 127 degrees. We're going to be using a convection mode, but you can see that there's no way to alter the temperature of the oven because of the mode. But there is the time over here. The time is illuminated, and right now it's telling us that it's going to take 3 hours and 30 minutes to roast this beef tenderloin to 127 degrees. If I want to modify the time, both in terms of the duration of the cooking, but also when I would like the roast to be done, I just press the time button again, and now I can start to modify things. The first thing we're going to say, it says switch off time, press again. So the switch off time is basically when do we want it to be done. So if I want to determine when I want it to be done, I press it twice, and now I can pick a time as long as it's at least 2.5 hours in the future from right now. So right now at, let's see, it is 1:25. The soonest I can have this done is 4:55 p.m., 2.5 hours in the future. If I want to change that, I just use my knob to scroll to the time when I would like the roast to be done. So let's just say 6 p.m. Now I've done that. Now I'm going to press again, and now the duration is telling me it's 3 hours and 30 minutes of roasting time. If I don't have that much time, or I'd like to cook the roast faster, I scroll backwards, and I can go as low as 2 hours and 30 minutes, should I want the roast to cook a little faster. Or if I want to extend the roasting time, I can scroll forward to 4 hours and 30 minutes. So this is just like the second generation model in terms of what we can do with the oven. It's just a little different way of coming about it. Then once I've got to that point, I hit OK. And now what it's going to tell me is I've got to put my beef in there, insert the temperature probe, and it will begin to cook at approximately 4.5 hours prior to 6 o'clock, which in this case would be in 4 minutes. It would start to cook that roast. Yes, Lynn?
By adjusting the time, does it change the texture of the tenderloin?
It can, because if we shorten the time, the roasting time for that piece of meat, it will use a higher temperature in the oven in order to achieve that internal temperature. So you may get a slightly different texture on the exterior of the meat. My recommendation, and this is my personal recommendation for this, is if you are using the slow roast mode and you would like your roast to have a little more of an exterior caramelization or texture, what I always recommend is either sear whatever it is you are going to roast on your barbecue grill, on your charbroiler, if you have one of the Wolf inside charbroilers, you could use your infrared griddle and sear it there as well. I like to do it before I roast it because it's never going to impact the quality of the meat on the inside. You're never going to overcook it or anything like that. So just give it a quick sear on one of those items and on one of those appliances, and then set it into this oven using your probe to roast it to give you optimum exterior texture. It is true that because it is a slow roasting mode in this oven, you are never going to get that beautiful, crunchy, caramelized exterior because the temperature just never gets up that high in this oven in order to do that to the exterior of your roast. So it's always advisable to do a little bit of a sear on the outside. Conversely, you could cook it to where it's completely done, and then you could flash it onto your barbecue grill for just 30 seconds or so on each side of whatever it is, or just to give it a little more caramelization, knowing then that you do run the very slight risk of perhaps raising the internal temperature slightly. So it may be, instead of 127, it might be 129. Not sure that's going to make a huge difference, but if you're worried about that internal, it's always easier to do it at the beginning of the process rather than at the end, right? So that's, do you have questions? Any more questions about the slow roasting mode? Again, you're going to want to use that probe. It's going to be the most essential tool for that when you're using the probe, because that probe is going to really determine, you know, that internal temperature. So again, with rare, and you can set that temperature. So if I want to change that internal temperature, touch the temp button when I'm just come to that, and I can raise that internal temperature just clicking it up. If I want it to be more medium rare, I might raise it to something around 135 degrees, right? And then you can proceed with the process at that point. Now we're at 135 internal temperature. We're still running in convection mode, and we're doing a 3 hour and 30 minute roasting time, which is the default. But again, you can change that temperature, that time, excuse me, down as low as 2.5 hours or extend it as long as 4 hours and 30 minutes. The 4 hours and 30 minutes time is really ideal for something that might be a slightly lesser cut, something that's a little tougher, that doesn't really suffer too much from being in the oven for a little longer period of time. So when you have a leg or something like that that you might want to let cook a little bit longer at a lower temperature, you might get a more tender piece of meat. For something like a beef tenderloin or a prime rib, you probably want to stick to that 3 hour and 30 minute to 2 hour and 30 minute time frame in order to give you the quality that you're looking for. Okay, so again, Wolf Gourmet, there's the slow roast. So recipes, let's talk about putting your recipes into the oven, right? If you have a process that you really enjoy and you want to save it so that for the future you can use it again, it's a little different process here than from the second generation oven. When you get to the My Recipes button, you're going to touch enter, right? And the first thing you're going to get is recipe 1, right? But you can scroll over until it says empty, and now you have an empty slot to enter that process into. So in this case, we're at recipe 2. That's an empty slot. We're going to touch the button enter, and now we're going to say, let's enter that recipe. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select a mode. So we hit change, and step 1 is your first choice. So now mode comes up, and you choose the mode that you'd like to cook in. So in this case, we're going to go mode to convection, steam, right? Now we're going to change the temperature by using the scroll and turn it up to, say, let's do 340 degrees, right? And then if we have a time that we want to set our timer over here. We're going to set that time for our recipe. Now we're at 50 seconds, but let's just say that at 340 degrees, we're going to roast our chicken breast for, let's just do 20 minutes. So now we've got a nice way to do a chicken breast, 20 minutes, 340 degrees of convection steam, right? So that's what we want for our time, right? And then we hit enter. So now we've got that there, and now we just want to, whoops, going the wrong way. So we hit OK. So we got everything. So we hit OK. Now what we get is the word save here. So if we want to save that in there, we just hit OK again. First question it's going to always ask you is, do you want to start that recipe right now? If you don't, just back up one step to back. And now that recipe is saved. So if I want to come in and operate that, I come to this in my, well, let's just start from the beginning. How about that? We'll come there, turn on with our button to access our gourmet features, come to my recipes, hit enter, go to recipe number 2. Unfortunately, we can't name it, so you're going to have to make a little cheat sheet for yourself somewhere. Maybe recipe 2 is your roasted chicken breast. Works out nicely, so you want to just touch enter, and then it's going to give you a synopsis of how you want to cook it. 340, 20 minutes of convection steam. Hit start, and boom, off it goes and starts cooking. All right. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and that's pumping the water back over. So there's how you save a recipe. I believe in this model, there are 10 open slots for saving a recipe. So you can fill up 10 on your own. And then of course, obviously you can modify them, overwrite them. You just have to keep a record of what it is that you've saved in there so that you know for the future what you might want to do. Okay, so there again is the recipe. Thanks. And then keep warm, we've discussed that. The user settings, and then descaling, and then the cleanse mode for all of those things. All right. So one thing I should mention that's unique about this oven that is different from the second generation is that when we are in convection steam mode, when we're running that manual transmission, if you will, right, and we want to run convection steam, one of the nice things about it, which we can't do in the next generation of oven, is we can decide when we want to turn the steam off, right? We know that when we're running in convection steam, the oven is generating steam in addition using the convection heat to whatever temperature that we've chosen. So if we've chosen 360 degrees of convection steam, right? And we think, well, okay, we'll set a little time duration there for, well, let's just do 2 or 3 minutes. I went to an hour, excuse me. There we go. There's 3 minutes, right? So now we just start it. So right now the oven is heating up. It's going to run steam in the beginning while it's heating up, but it's creating a beautiful steamy environment in the oven. But we've set our timer and we know that we're going to do this operation for 3 minutes, but we've decided that we only need the steam for a certain amount of time during the cooking process. So we've added a certain amount of steam. Perhaps we're doing some rolls, we're refreshing some rolls or something like that, and we know that we'd like them to be quickly refreshed with a little bit of steam, but then we want to heat them up without adding any more steam. So once we've gotten, say, a minute into this process, we can touch the mode button a second time, and that will turn the steam off while leaving the fan on whilst bringing it up to that 360 degrees. So you get a little dose of steam, or a longer dose, depending on what kind of time frame you're looking at. But this you can do in this oven that you can't do in the next generation. We can't manually control the steam. So if I just hit mode again, right, now the steam is turned off, but the oven is still raising up to 360 degrees. So it allows you to sort of shift gears in the middle. You can go from a steam and convection environment to a purely convection environment. Should that suit whatever it is you're cooking, that you don't need steam for the entirety of the process. This really is going to be something that you're going to have to experiment with in terms of how long you might want to have steam present in the oven cavity before it becomes detrimental to whatever it is you're cooking. But again, it's one of those things that you can experiment with in this oven that you couldn't do that in the second generation oven. We can't turn the steam off in convection steam mode when we're using the second generation. We just have to let it run its course, or switch modes completely, actually turn the oven off, or change modes in the middle of it. But that's kind of a nice feature. So again, and it tells you right here in the screen, in convection steam, and it just tells you with a little note there, for steam on, press mode. And it would obviously, if the steam was on, it'll tell you for steam off, press mode. So it's a nice little feature that you can use if you are really just wanting little doses of steam whilst you're cooking, which can be ideal, again, for refreshing something, a loaf of bread, some rolls, something like that that might need a little bit of steam, but really what they need is a nice dose of hot air in order to warm it up. So just a nice feature with that. Any questions have come through since then? Or hopefully we're explaining it clearly enough so that people can get an idea. And again, you see the residual heat. Most, again, don't remove the water tank. This is just like on the second generation. When you get that message, remember that the oven, some of the steam that has been created might be in the boiler. You're not going to utilize it. They then filter that water back into the reservoir so that you don't have to refill it quite so often. So you don't want to remove the reservoir when it's doing that. And the pump is retrieving some of that nice clean steam and putting it back into the reservoir. So that was pretty much what we came to cover today with the interface. I hope this has been instructive for all of you. Again, if you would like that cheat sheet that has the jump start times for steaming and different preparations in the oven with approximate times and temperatures and modes, just let us know. We're happy to get that out to you so that you'll have that as just a quick little refresher. Yes.
So going back to the cleaning,
Uh-huh.
When you're using the banh mi,
Mm-hmm.
do you make a paste with it, or how exactly do you?
Right. So when I'm using the banh mi to clean the oven, this is a little hot right now, but basically what I'm doing is I'm letting the oven, if I have a little bit of residual water on the base of the oven, I take the two side racks out, sprinkle the banh mi into that residual water from steaming clean the oven. Then I create a paste on the floor of the oven with my blue Scotch-Brite pad, and then work that up and around the sides and onto the ceiling. That's really the easiest way, because usually the floor and the back wall are what get the dirtiest in terms of cleaning the oven. So I always make the paste with the banh mi on the floor and then use that up and around the rest of the cavity.
And wipe it out.
And then wipe it out. Then clean it out with a towel with some fresh clean water. Just wipe it all out. And then after you do that, if you just want to take it one step further, you can run the steam for 5-10 minutes. Just give it another quick little steam cleaning and then wipe that down with a clean towel, and it really will shine like the sun. But that banh mi really does a nice job for cleaning the interior of the oven without having to use any really harsh chemicals inside.
Kind of going back to that.
Sure.
Steam, where you can turn the steam on and off.
Yes.
Would that be good for like refreshing pastries?
Absolutely.
Like a reheat?
Yes. Reheat, the reheat button, when you go into the reheat mode here, when we're in that mode and we're choosing reheat, right? So we have reheat here, right? Again, reheat gives you 1 and 3. There's always going to be a little bit of steam in reheat. It will never really exceed 250 degrees. But for something, if you're going to say, let's say you had a couple of croissants that you wanted to refresh in the oven, you might give them 20 seconds of steam in convection steam and then turn the steam off so that the outside of the croissant gets nice and fresh. The beauty of the steam is that it creates that little bit of moisture on the outside. And just like when you're baking that loaf of bread, the moisture on the outside, when coupled with heat after the moisture, is going to help it get a really beautiful flaky crust, crispy crust on the outside. So that little bit of steam won't sog out your pastry, but then you're going to that higher temperature to get that pastry a little bit crispy again. You don't have in this, like we have in the second generation, the auto reheat mode, right? Where you have crispy and moist. In the case of a crispy reheat, using convection steam at a high temperature and then adding steam could be an ideal way for refreshing a pastry. And here's how you might go about doing that. Let me just show you. So let's say we wanted to do that. We wanted to refresh something at a high temperature, right? So let's say we go to our mode, we choose convection steam, and let's say we're going to reheat those croissants. We want them to be nice and crispy. We might pick a high temperature like 375. So we'll go to 375 degrees, right? And we'll hit enter, go, and it's going to go. Now the steam is on, so we're going to turn the steam off now. So what the oven is doing now is heating itself up to 375 degrees. Once the oven has reached that temperature, we may place our tray of croissant in there, immediately hit the mode button, give it some steam for, you could set the timer. Then for that, you want to give it 20 minutes of steam or 20 seconds of steam. There we go. We've got 20 seconds. Timer again. It's going to count down 20 seconds. And once that 20 seconds is finished, we'll turn the steam off and just let the rest of those croissants heat up in that nice hot oven cavity. So that little blast of steam is going to be really nice to just land on the outside of those croissants, moisturize them for the second, then they're staying in that warm oven, and they're only going to take a few minutes to reheat at that way. So now their steam is done. So then we would hit our mode again, and now the steam is off again. So you can do it that way as well. That's one of the nice things for reheating, using that convection steam mode where you have control over the steam. Okay. More questions?
So the door comes off the same way on this.
It does.
As it does the new one. So
it does. The door is exactly the same. The clips are down here at the base. Flip them forward. Oh, you can't see. All right, I'm gonna let Lynn tip the camera while we do that. So if you guys can see, just like on the new model, you see the hinge here. I see my fat fingers pointing at. You just flip that hinge forward. Same with the other side, just flip it forward, and then again, raise it to the resting position, which is about a 45-degree angle, and then lift up and out, and voila, the door is off. Look how beautiful and clean this oven is. Look at that.
We did have a question about the patina.
On the inside.
Yeah.
The Bon Ami will take that sort of golden patina. Now, it is normal that if you use the oven extensively for doing, you know, even baking, you're going to get a slightly golden, bronzy patina on the inside of the oven. But the Bon Ami will take that off. Again, that just making that paste on the floor of the oven and then rubbing it around the interior, that will take the patina off. Remember, you can run your trays through the dishwasher if you'd like to. But again, if you want to really scrub these clean, you can step up from the Bon Ami to the Barkeeper's Friend, which does a really nice job of getting off built up food debris and grease and things like that. But again, for the interior of the oven, the Bon Ami and the blue Scotch-Brite pad with the scrubbing side won't scratch your oven and will clean it and make it stay a beautiful silver color. But the patina is normal for this oven. It's going to be happening if you use it extensively and don't clean it as often as you probably would like. So,
how about cleaning the glass if there's something like super stuck to it?
So the best way to clean the glass is, and I don't have it with me because I have it down at the showroom, is get yourself a paint scraping razor blade, right? It usually comes in a plastic handle of some kind. It's going to have a very thin single-sided razor in it. The thinner, the better. What I generally do is I make a paste from baking soda and white vinegar. Make that paste, rub it onto the surface of the inside of the glass. Then I take my razor and I run it horizontally across the front of the base of the glass. As long as the razor is sitting flat against it, it will not scratch your glass, and it will take anything that might be cooked onto the glass off. Then once I've run that razor across it and kind of scraped off that mixture of baking soda and vinegar, I just take a clean towel with water and wipe it down. And then to get it really shiny, I use non-ammoniated window cleaner on the inside and then give it a quick little buff with the inside of that. That will also work for, the inside of your M series, E series, or dual fuel oven glass doors. It will work for that as well. Those tend to build up a little bit more buildup because there's no steam on the inside of the oven, but in those, it'll work exactly the same way. Again, put the paste on there, scrape it with that razor, and then water, and then a quick buffing with that window cleaner will make it shine really, really nicely.
Cool.
Any more questions?
Also, if anybody wanted to unmute at this point in time and ask a question, feel free to do so. If the chat's not your favorite, we'll get you taken care of stuff. I have a request for a class on the M series oven.
Okay.
I think we can make that happen.
We can probably make that happen. But again, I hope you guys have found this instructive for using the interface on your oven. Again, operation is going to be the same, just not quite so many layers in the gourmet mode, but I dare say that you're still going to get the best possible results using, that convection steam mode and that steam, or the convection humid mode, where you're not venting the oven and allowing that excess moisture to be dispersed from the oven. And so therefore your food will stay much nicer and moister and all that stuff, while still giving you a nice brown exterior, depending on what it is you're cooking. So any more questions? No more questions.
All right.
All right. Well,
thanks everybody for joining us.
Yes. Thank you again so much for taking the time to come out and do this. And again, if you have any more questions, just feel free to direct them towards myself or Lynn at Roth Living. We're happy to respond to you. And hopefully very soon we'll be able to welcome you back into the showroom. If you have any more questions and you'd like to get a little more up close and personal with the appliances, we'll definitely hopefully be able to welcome you in very soon. So
Awesome.
again, thanks everyone, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.